Hello everyone, it's Wednesday and you're watching Within the Frame. I'm Kim Bo-kyung. North Korea has, as of Wednesday, remained unresponsive to regular contact through the Inter-Korean liaison communication channel for 6 straight days. While widely expected to be an intentional cutoff, North Korean Kim Jong-un called for practical and offensive upgrades to the regime's nuclear weapons. What is the reclusive regime up to? And meanwhile, another issue this week is leaked documents of details of conversations between Korean security officials. Yet Seoul is downplaying alleged spying by the U.S., saying documents have been mostly fabricated. Now, how is this incident going to affect the upcoming summit between Seoul and Washington? For an in-depth analysis, we welcome into the studio Doctor Go Myong-hyun, Senior Fellow at the Asan Institute for Policy Studies. Dr. Go, welcome.
Very good to be here.
And we also have Evan Revere, Senior Advisor at Albright Stonebridge Group. Mr. Revere was also a former Acting Assistant Secretary of State for East Asian and Pacific Affairs. Mr. Revere, thank you for your time.
Thanks for having me.
All right, first question to our Dr. Go. Now, North Korea has remained unresponsive to daily routine calls with South Korea on an inter-Korean liaison communication channel and also a military hotline for several days. First of all, what are these channels and how are they normally operated?
So these are essentially a military hotline, so telephone line connecting the two militaries, North Korea and South Korea. This is meant to ensure that there's no accidental clashes between the two militaries. So as you remember, the DMZ that separates the two Koreas essentially is a buffer zone in order to avoid an accidental clash. So this is to ensure there's like a no accidental escalation between the two sides. And so this military hotline was established back in 2002. And it's been operating on and off since then. And then North Korea, though, have been using this in a way to pressure South Korea by creating uncertainty. For instance, it's not really, not answering picking up the phone call per se, it's not an escalation, but then the absence of communication clearly shows that there's an increase in tension. So this is exactly the effect the North Korean regime intends to have by taking this action. So this has happened before, but then overall, chances that this is going to return to normal sooner rather than later.
Right, I see. Now, Evans, it is widely believed that the reclusive regime has intentionally cut off the dialogue channels. And though we cannot be sure why the North remains unresponsive, what do you believe the main reason is?
Well, as a longtime observer of North Korean behavior, it's very clear to me that things like intentional uncertainty, the creation of mystery, obfuscation, an intentional lack of transparency, all of these things are very popular tools that Pyongyang uses when it is feeling under pressure. Those tools that I just mentioned are an effort to keep the Republic of Korea and the United States off balance by making it less than clear to us that North Korea is headed in a particular direction, and it's meant to obfuscate, if you will, North Korea's true intentions. As our military colleagues might say, North Korea uses these things as a force multiplier to strengthen its position vis-a-vis Washington and Seoul. And in the current context, as the United States and South Korea have very vigorously resumed their large-scale joint exercises after a long gap, North Korea, I think, is trying to find ways to convey and demonstrate strength and readiness and capability. But they're also, as we're seeing right now by the lack of communication, trying to undermine the confidence and preparedness of the United States and the Republic of Korea.
Right, I see. Now, Dr. Go, I remember that you said this has happened before. So were there previous cases where daily phone calls with South Korea through these communication channels went unanswered? And what were the reasons then?
Well, several times. For instance, the most notorious case was the interruption or suspension of these daily phone calls for 13 months, starting in June of 2020. And the reason North Korea did this is because they wanted to protest the so-called leaflet campaign by South Korean activists focusing on North Korean human rights issues. So North Korea, in order to pressure the administration of President Moon Jae-in suspended these daily phone calls for 13 months. And since then, North Korea has taken this kind of actions on and off. Last year as well, North Korea suspended these daily phone calls, in order to protest the joint military drills. So as Mr. Revere has indicated, North Korea is using this as a political tool to send a message to Seoul and Washington that sometimes North Korean regime is unhappy about certain actions taken by South Korea and the United States. So oftentimes they do this because they want to send a message at the time of joint military exercises. They want to show that the military exercises held by the two countries, according to North Korea, increases tension in the peninsula. This is one way they can show their displeasure.
So I guess it's not a surprising move at all.
Not at all.
Right. Now, Mr. Revere, meanwhile, North Korean leader Kim Jong-un on Monday called for more practical and offensive upgrades to Pyongyang's nuclear arsenal to overwhelm the regime's enemies during a meeting with senior military officials. And the words are that the North is gearing up for provocations and perhaps cutting off its communication channels could be related to this. What could North Korea be up to, and when might we see provocations?
Well, I think the remarks by Kim Jong-un to his senior defense officials are in keeping with the ongoing efforts that North Korea is making to strengthen its military capabilities, including its nuclear and ballistic missile capabilities. This is part and parcel of a very elaborate program that's been going on for quite some time. So I think it's important to see it in that context. It's hard for me to believe that North Korea would try to carry out a major provocation right at the moment when you have probably the highest level of bilateral military cooperation and training going on between the United States and the ROK that we've seen in quite some time. You have fairly considerable U.S. forces in the region. You have the two militaries at a very high state of readiness, thanks to the resumption of these exercises. You can never dismiss the possibility, obviously, of some sort of conventional provocation. But in the current environment that we're in right now, it would be a very foolish and misguided step, precisely because the United States and the ROK are so well prepared. But I think it's also important to keep in mind that North Korea, the DPRK, feels that it has an increased level of political and diplomatic cover provided by China and provided by Russia, thanks to their blocking of any efforts in the United States and the United Nations Security Council to take measures against North Korea. So I think this has contributed to a certain level of self-confidence and sort of this macho rhetoric that we're hearing from North Korea right now. And so the ongoing difficulties between the United States and China, the ongoing war between Russia and Ukraine, all of these things, I think, are contributing to this higher level of self-confidence that North Korea has. That doesn't necessarily translate into a possible provocation, although we always have to be ready for that.
Right, I see. So though we do not know for sure, there would be low possibility that North Korea would come up with a strong provocation anytime soon. Right.
The consequences would be severe, and I think they know that quite well.
Right, I see. Now, Dr. Go, let's shift the gears a little bit here. The Korean Central News Agency said last Saturday that its Defense Science Research Institute tested the HALE-2 underwater strategic weapon system from April 4th to 7th. This is already the third time the reclusive regime has boasted a successful test of the drone, the underwater drone. What were the details that KCNA unveiled, and why does the regime keep emphasizing this specific weapon system?
So HALE-2 is essentially another iteration of the HALE-1, the underwater drone that the North Korea is developing. And in a way, we can consider this to be essentially an underwater cruise missile. What North Korea tried to demonstrate this time was the range of this particular weapon system. And the reason why they named it a strategic weapon system is, again, because of the range. North Korea claims that this drone was operating on its own autonomously for 72 hours for a range of 1,000 kilometers.
Right.
So therein lies the significance of these weapon systems. It's capable of carrying a tactical nuclear warhead, and then at the same time, because it's operating underwater, it's going to be very difficult for South Korea or the United States to detect such a weapon system beforehand. So this has clearly this shows the objective for North Korea is to undermine the missile defense system that the South Korea and the United States are developing right now, the so-called kill chain system or three-axis system. And then also because North Korea is trying to essentially prevent the reinforcement of U.S. forces into the Korean Peninsula in case of a conflict. They are going to use these drones to target the major ports on the South Korean side. These are the entry points for the U.S. military reinforcements and equipments as well. So since if this threat is indeed it has a potential to be huge, and also it's indeed being developed and it can mature technologically, then obviously it's going to represent a huge threat. But at the same time, this is a theoretical threat, so to speak. So the overall, the significance of this strategic weapon system lies with the fact that it can essentially act as a missile, just like the ballistic missiles that North Korea has developed and has demonstrated its force, but then it's operating underwater.
I see. Now, Evans, our Dr. Go, as he pointed out, this Hail-2 has reportedly simulated a distance of 1,000 kilometers for 71 hours and 6 minutes. And compared to the first and the second test, it cruised some 12 hours longer than the first one and 39 hours longer than the second, and extended its range by 400 kilometers. Now, though we are going to talk about whether this is a bluff or not, but still, if these details are true, how can it affect South Korea and Japan's defense systems, and how significant is this improvement?
Well, I think it's important to separate North Korean claims about what it's doing from the reality of what they can do. We really, at least I don't know, what I'm sure our military and intelligence experts have a pretty good sense of what the North Korean capabilities actually are. But I would take a lot of the statements that we're hearing from North Korea about these capabilities with a grain of salt. Having said that, the United States is very proud, justifiably, of its naval capabilities, of its amphibious capabilities, and systems like this are probably being developed by North Korea in order to counter the overwhelming naval and amphibious capabilities that the United States and its partners possess. And since amphibious operations were part of the recent U.S. ROK exercise, I think this is North Korea's way of sending a message that we're developing systems to take on these capabilities. That doesn't mean that the capabilities would work. That doesn't mean that they're necessarily nuclear capable, although there seem to be those claims coming out of Pyongyang. But let's also keep in mind that the United States is among the leading world powers in developing underwater drone technology. And so not only offensively, but defensively. And I'm sure that the United States is working very closely with its ROK and Japanese allies to talk about ways to counter systems like this should they be developed by North Korea.
Right, I see. Now, Dr. Go, yet some experts, like I have mentioned before, including those from 38 North, say Pyongyang's unmanned underwater this vehicle system offers little to bolster its military capabilities, and that the unveiling of this weapon system is actually more about political utility than military application. What is this about?
So first of all, from the information that we were able to gather from the recent test that North Korea has shown, we have doubts about the maturity of this particular technology by North Korea. We believe that the North Koreans have clearly developed an underwater drone, but then it's not very clear whether North Korea has this sophisticated guidance system that allows these drones to operate it really autonomously on its own. So this is a big if. And so, and the chances that North Korea haven't had success in this regard, or maybe not be able to have the success in this regard for the foreseeable future, even though we should not underestimate their technical capabilities, the realistic assessment is that North Korea doesn't have that capability yet. But on the other hand, the reason why North Korea is demonstrating these capabilities that are still not incomplete is probably because they're using this in a form of a political bluffing. And the reason why North Korea is doing this is because first of all, North Korea wants to send a message to the United States that North Korea's so-called strategy of mass production of nuclear weapons is bearing fruits. And if indeed that's successful, then the United States will have a lot of complications in order to respond to the heightened level of nuclear threats coming from North Korea. And we have seen some examples of that, given the differences of opinion between Seoul and Washington among the experts about what's the next level of, or next step for deterrence and assurance that the United States can lend to South Korea. I mean, this all is precipitated by the fact that North Korea has achieved a very high level of nuclear development. But then we have to remember that the use of nuclear weapons is always very difficult. Right. There's something called a nuclear taboo right now. And this is the reason why all the major nuclear powers, such as the United States, Russia, and China, and other nuclear powers, haven't been able to use nuclear weapons in reality after the United States unveiled these weapons at the end of the Second World War in Hiroshima and Nagasaki. So what North Korea is trying to do now is that somehow convince South Korea and the United States that North Korea can indeed and is willing to use these weapons, which raises tension, and then the tension gives North Korea leverage in any potential negotiation that could happen in the near future. This is exactly what North Korea is engaged in right now. No real escalation or trying to precipitate or cause war between them and South Korea and the United States. It's all about developing leverage.
Right, I see. Now, Mr. Revere, moving on to a set of leaked Pentagon documents. Now, documents shared on social media revealed that the U.S. intelligence services eavesdropped on conversations at the South Korean presidential office in early March. Now, how did this become public, and what is the implication of such document leakage incident?
Well, first of all, I think we need to be somewhat skeptical about these purported documents. Some of the documents seem to be real, but a number of them seem to have been manipulated. These documents initially showed up on a rather curious right-wing website that has been known to be somewhat sympathetic to the Russians. And indeed, some of the documents that related to Russian casualties versus Ukraine casualties appear to have been intentionally manipulated. So some skepticism is in order here. The revelations that have come out so far have stated that the key revelation regarding the U.S. and the ROK is that the ROK has been reluctant to engage in shipment of military equipment to Ukraine. Well, there's no surprise there. There's no secret there. That position has been well known for quite some time. So for that and other reasons, I'm a bit skeptical about this. However, the fact that these documents have come out, some of which may be legitimate, is something that is a bit of a concern for President Biden. It's a concern for both presidents going into a summit. But I think the communication channels between Seoul and Washington are being used quite actively. I think both governments have been looking very carefully about what's come out so far and have come to a similar conclusion about the validity of a lot of these documents. I don't think it's going to have a great effect on the summit or any effect at all, quite frankly, in my own personal view.
Right, I see. Now, Dr. Go, our evidence is quite skeptical about these documents, and apparently Seoul's top office too is thinking the same way. It says that they have dismissed wiretapping concerns, saying much of the leaked U.S. document was actually fabricated, and it also ruled out the possibility of Washington wiretapping Seoul's intelligence, saying that there is a highly stringent security system in place. Now, how do you see Seoul's response to this incident?
Well, so far as Mr. Revere has indicated that we cannot be entirely sure whether all this information and documents have been revealed 100% 100% true or fake. So we have to wait and see whether which part of this revelation happens to be genuine. Having said that, I think clearly the United States has a very high level and advanced signal intelligence capabilities, and theoretically speaking, the United States probably is able to monitor some communications happening anywhere in the world. But then at the same time, the information that was revealed about South Korea's hesitance to, or like being, I would say, conservative about expanding the level of assistance lent to Ukraine. This is not something very secretive about it. I mean, this is a well-known fact. It's an information that's actually revealed to the media many times before, and it's an official position of the South Korean government. So that's why we have doubts about the veracity and even the usefulness of this particular intelligence. But having said that, I think, as Mr. Rivera said, the importance for the both countries is to ensure that we have a common front and then minimize the optics of differences or friction between the allies. But but beneath the surface, I think there's clearly a lot of dialogue taking place. And if indeed the United States has been able to breach South Korea's very, secure communication system, then I think the United States will be very happy to give South Korea assurance that it's not going to happen in the future.
Right. Now, I'd like to ask more questions to our experts, but since we're running out of time, Mr. Revere, I think this would be our last question. These leaked documents have put Seoul in an awkward situation right now, especially as President Yoon is preparing to travel to Washington later this month. Will this affect the very first state visit by a South Korean president in 12 years?
I don't think so, quite frankly, to answer your question simply. The U.S. and the ROK, the alliance right now is as strong as I've ever seen it, quite frankly. I think President Yoon and President Biden have done a superb job in putting the alliance on a very, very solid footing. Here we are celebrating the 70th year of that alliance. This is an important anniversary. The two countries are on virtually every major issue on the same page. Where we're not on the same page, there are excellent channels through which the two sides are resolving any gaps that may exist. I feel very, very confident about the current state of the alliance and about the ability of Seoul and Washington, Presidents Yoon and Biden, to celebrate this important anniversary in the appropriate way and to plan for even further strengthening of the alliance in the future.
All right. Unfortunately, this is all the time we have for today's edition. But thank you, Dr. Go, and of course, our Evans, for your insights. We really appreciate it.
Thank you.
Thank you.
All right, this is all for Within the Frame tonight. We'll be back tomorrow with more in-depth stories. Thank you for watching, and goodbye.